Good morning. This is March 2024, and today we're going to talk with Paul Foulds about the Paiute history in Nipigon, Red Rock area. Mr. Paiute was Paul's father-in-law and Susan's dad, and he has an amazing amount of history that was stored in different places on the Paiute property. So we'll turn it over to you, Paul, to start.
Okay. So the story or stories are mainly about Arvo Paiute, because he was the one that emigrated from Finland to Canada here. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background of Arvo. He was born December 29th, 1888. He died in 1949 here in Nipigon. And his parents, before he was born, were living in Sweden, and they emigrated from Sweden over to Finland. And this is where a name change came in place. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Paiute Niemi, or Vidland is Swedish, and Vid means land, or land, and then Lund is the point of land. So Paiute Niemi was the land point. So
legally, do you think changed the name, or just?
I think he did legally. Yeah,
okay.
Because it was actually on a piece of document that I have. Like many documents, it was one of those church documents from one of the parishes,
right.
A Lutheran church.
Because the more Finnish people you talk to, the more you don't hear that they changed their names.
Yes.
Quite a little bit. So, but I don't know if they were legal. That's nice to hear that that was legal.
That was legal, but
yeah.
Okay. So they moved to an area called Kurravesi, and the Edward Vidland was a baker, and Edward Vidland was the father of Arvo. I don't know if I got that straight, but the family was of Edward Vidland was Arvo, and he had a brother, Adolf, and two girls were born. One died at childbirth, the other one died at 7 years of age, and we think it was probably something like an influenza that went through and killed them, because back then they didn't have anything to fight off these viruses, really. Arvo went to school for woodworking and engineering, plus business. He excelled in that, and his brother did as well, but his brother went into forestry. There's this one. So this is a story about the boys, Arvo and Adolf. They were constantly the focus of scandal in the small farming area that they lived. They were blamed for many of the accidents around the area, such as broken windows and broken fences. This made it difficult for the boys to live in the area, coupled with the fact that they were poor, and their mother was perceived as being somewhat of a snob. So they got their schooling, and in 1908 Arvo decided to emigrate to Canada. But before that, when they were in Finland, he had befriended a young lady who was married to an older judge. She would take care of the boys after they had been in fights, and she cleaned them up, patched their clothes, sent them home, and she wasn't much older than the boys. When Susan and I went over to Finland in 1983, we met this lady. She was quite elderly, and she came over to Susan's cousin's house for an afternoon of coffee and stories.
And so she remembered them well.
Oh, she remembered them very well. In fact, she came to Nipigon at one point when they were here. and stayed for a good number of months. So, let's see. Yeah, so the elderly judge liked Arvo so much that he gave him money, not just to immigrate, but to purchase parcels of land.
Wow.
And because he had the business sense background, he made some very good purchases. The Paiute Mountain is that because he bought that chunk of property off of Jack McCurdy.
Oh.
And that was before the Depression.
Wow. Famous Jack McCurdy.
Yes. And then he had also bought tracts of land out in Dorian and Hercot. And he was an ideas person. When you read all of this, it's like a three-ring circus. It's just so much information and the ideas that he had.
So in there, does it say, Paul, why he picked this area to come to?
Because there was many other people from Finland coming to the area, to northern Ontario, to Sault Ste. Marie, to Michigan.
Oh, okay.
In fact, just yesterday, Susan was going through the archives of a certain Michigan newspaper, and she found her parents' wedding announcement in this newspaper in Michigan.
Wow.
In Finnish.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
so...
cool, okay.
Okay, when Arvo first arrived, we believe he came to New York. There's some discrepancy between that and information that I got later, but we're trying to figure that one out. He married a woman who lived only 8 months after they were married. They had a child before this, obviously, and the child was Oni, which is Susan's uncle.
Wow.
And Oiva's brother. He was born in 1916. So in the meantime, he had been working in Detroit, where he got a job at the Packard motor plant, where he used dovetailing to on the car doors, right, when they used wood back then. He got the job simply by showing his crafted toolbox that he had made with all this dovetailing. So, and he worked there, we're not sure if it was 3 or 4 years or a total of 5 years, but after his wife died, he moved back up to Port Arthur, and then to Nipigon, and he started working in the lumber camps, and he went down to Chapleau, and he befriended a young lady named Hannah, and they got married, and she was the camp cook. But after they got married, they decided to come to Nipigon, and he was still working out in the bush, but he also wanted to set up his own business. So he had this piece of property that he bought, which is right behind the Husky, okay, where Mr. Rampinen used to live, and Jack's sister, Jack Dampier's sister.
Oh, okay. I thought Jack owned it, but anyway, one of the Dampiers. Right?
Yeah, well, Jack is up on 8th Street, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
With Lisa, and then
could be.
Then his sister and Turner.
Oh yes, right. So, and that's right.
Live there right now. Right. At any rate, he set up the sawmill there, and he set up, the company is called Nipigon Lumber Company, and he accessed the contracts from the government on Crown land, and brought in the wood, and then he sawed it up and sold most of it for housing builds in Nipigon here, because at that time there was a lot of Finlanders actually that were moving out of the country, as we said earlier, and they needed houses to live in, so they got all these small
Wow.
3-door houses or 4-door houses.
So again, what timeline is that, Paul?
That was about 1910,
Okay.
we figure.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, he set that up, and then he also went up to Thunder Bay at some point, and he built, with other contractors, 10 houses on McIntyre Street. And they would be 100 years old now, and they're 3-story. They're large houses. Because of his carpentry and his engineering skills, he was hired by the superintendent of the grain elevators, which were just being built, to supervise one of the grain elevators, the Saskatchewan Pool. And the fellow who hired him was C.D. Howe. So he was a member of Parliament. As people don't know that, but
Yeah.
they called him the Minister of Everything,
Yeah.
because he was so involved, especially during the war, Second World War. At any rate, they became friends. So he would drop in to see Arvo when he was down this way, and that's how that Saskatchewan.
So where did Arvo live when he was here then, when he had that sawmill in there?
He had a house right there.
Oh, he had the house there.
And then they sold the house and sold it to one of the Sallows. I think it was Wilho Sallow or whatever, but they used to put candles on Christmas trees. And Wilho did that, and I guess he fell asleep, and the tree caught on fire, and the house caught on fire. So that was the end of that. But then Arvo was living, I'm not sure, elsewhere. There's kind of a missing link there, because the house that is here now on Hogan Road, he built around 1923. I've got a picture of the house already built with a lot of mud around it, and then 4 cars, and the date on the license plate is 1923. So
that house is about 100 years old or more than.
it is.
Wow.
And it was such a masterpiece. Anita and Clara were talking about it
Yes.
in theirs.
Yes.
And saying that they went there for birthday parties or whatever, special birthday parties. And one thing that Oni told me was that the floorboards were turned on edge, and they were 2 feet thick oak. So there's a lot of oak still there, that if they needed to take it down a little bit, there's room there to play. But he had the signature curved roof.
Yeah.
And there was a few of them in town. One of them, I believe, was Risks.
Yes,
on
you're right. Yep.
Lower First Street.
And there's like a little balcony up on that.
And the balcony.
Right.
And the farmhouse was like that over in Red Rock.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes.
And then, like, that was the old farmhouse
Right.
at the back end. And then there's the house right beside or behind the cafe, Nipigon Cafe. I'm not sure it is sloped somewhat, but maybe somebody was just trying to do the same thing. But then beside that there was the sauna house.
Right. Yep.
And I'm not sure if Arvo built that or not, but there was a lot of carpenters in town back then.
And Finlanders were known, weren't they, for their carpentry skills here?
They were, for sure.
For sure, yeah.
So, in around 1925, he opened up a car dealership, or just before that, he owned up a gas station. And then he got the car dealership, and it was called McLaughlin Motors, but it ended up becoming a merger with another company, and they became General Motors.
Oh.
So he had cars, and he won sales awards the first couple of years, but then the the Depression came along, and they relinquished his dealership. You know, he had to let it go. He also lost the Risks house because of that.
So the dealership was in Nipigon?
Dealership was where Gerlach's garage was. That,
okay, the Legion parking lot now.
He built that.
Okay.
And then he sold that to the Gerlach brothers.
Right, right.
I think there was Charlie, Frank, Hank, and I'm not sure if there was a fourth one or not.
Okay.
But Hank ended up with it on his own for a while because his son, Alan, he worked there as a young boy with Bruce Atkinson. They worked there together.
And also, Wilbur Allen worked there.
Yes, he and Mr. Plemmel, I think, were partners in ownership there.
Yeah. We're waiting to interview Alan Gerlach.
Oh, good.
Because got lots of information too on those things.
Yes, and he's got photographs. I'm not sure.
So Arvo was in many things.
Oh, he had, as Oiva would say, too many irons in the fire.
Right.
So when they moved to the new house, he had a blacksmith shop in the garage there, that big garage at the back, and Ulo West, I think that's how you could pronounce it. He was the blacksmith at that time. Of course, they needed people to take care and maintain the equipment that they're renting out. Number one, horses. So that wasn't just equipment, but the equipment that went on a horse. They needed collars, they needed a sleigh, and to carry the wood out of the bush, because at that time, in 1925, there was not a motorized way of getting the wood out of the bush, or I should say cutting it down. They did start having tractors back then.
Okay.
I think it was in the late 20s that they started with the tractors. Carlo Jarvila would probably know better than I about some of that, just because he talked to a lot of the older fellows, so if his memory's good, which it seemed to be, he would know about that. So we are in 1925.
So in those days, you're talking about motorized vehicles, what was Arvo getting around in? When you think how he's traveling back and forth in the area.
Well, I think some of it was
no
a train, but then he did have an old truck.
So I was just asking now, I mean, when I even think of Everett getting around, I wonder, but I mean, how would Arvo, when you think he's in Thunder Bay, he's here, he's in Red Rock,
yes,
he's in the bush.
I think he took the train when he would go to Thunder Bay or down to Duluth. He would go down there as well. I think that's where he purchased his first Caterpillar bulldozer, which ended up hauling a lot of the wood out without having to use the horses nearly as much. They still had to use horses depending on how tight an area they were in, and in some areas Oiva said that they did do select logging.
Oh, okay.
Back then. He had properties on the Black Bay Peninsula that Oiva said he was part of the select logging there. And
I mean, just when you're saying you buy a tractor in the States in those days and get it hauled to
back
Nipigon.
up this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. He also, actually, he and Oni, Arvo's son, built a V-shaped snowplow, and Oni kept the highway or the road open to Thunder Bay for a couple of winters.
Oh my.
Yeah, so that would have been one way they got up, but then that was still late 30s, early 40s. So early on, I'm not 100% sure about where he or how he got
I
traveling.
thought maybe he had one of the first cars or something around here.
Well, he did have the cars, yeah.
Right.
That, especially after setting up a dealership, he would have had a car for sure. But 25. So when the Depression came, there was, of course, not a heck of a lot going on, and in 1944, which is after the Depression, things were starting to build up. The Red Rock Mill was going to be starting up, but I have to backtrack again. In the 30s, Arvo was involved with the committee to find a piece of property to build a paper mill because they wanted a paper mill in the area, and they tried the old mill site.
Yeah.
They couldn't get a footing at all.
That's a well-known story, isn't
yeah,
it? Yes.
So as a result, they did find one over in Red Rock, and they built that. And Arvo had the contract to clear all the land for the town site and the mill. Now, of course, he got all the wood and kept his lumber business going. What else did he do in the late 30s? The reason why, one of the reasons or factors why the mill went bankrupt in the 30s, because they thought they were going to have it up and running in 37, is because of the mismanagement of purchasing. They had a fellow that decided that the workers were in the wintertime were going to need snowshoes, so he ordered a whole carload of snowshoes, and he also ordered collars for the horses, and they would only fit a pony. So there was a lot of mismanagement of funds. So they got structures up, but the machinery wasn't there, the paper machine or whatever. So they did go bankrupt, and then it wasn't until 1944 that Brompton Paper took over, and I believe they shipped one of their used paper machines up from Quebec somewhere. I haven't the details on that, but that's my understanding of it.
So just think, though, that having that paper mill there then changed the whole economic face of Nipigon Red Rock.
Nipigon Red Rock, Dorian,
yeah,
Hercott, like all these
whole,
fellows that were working in the bush.
Yeah.
Beardmore Way, I guess you have to think Dorian and Hercott were probably supplying the other mills in Thunder Bay that were being or had been built.
Yeah, just changed everything.
Mm-hmm. So, what else?
So Paiu was really part of changing history.
Yes, he was
in those days.
And because there were so many Finnish people in town, he was quite popular. During the Depression, he helped people out because he had the money and the food or the power to buy the food. Because there were some notes that came along there that from people who were in desperate need of basics like bread and milk or something for the baby that was being born, and he made sure that they had supplies for those people. Like I say, there was so much that he was doing. The co-op, consumer co-op, he was part of that. He was one of the original presidents. In fact, I've got pictures, or I've got actually a couple of the certificates.
So that's a co-op that was across where Zechner's is.
Consumers co-op, yeah.
I had a picture of that recently.
Right. There was the storage place there that, as John mentioned in his interview, that he had flour and he had
in that building right
feed
across.
And everything. Yeah, because I can still remember
Same here.
being right there. Like I said, some of the correspondence was quite interesting from some of the people, and this one I'll read. It's from Emma Miller, and she's from Hercot. She says, I hereby acknowledge your permission to remove the hay baler from your farm at Red Rock as per verbal conversation and agreement of today. I promise to pay you the sum of $50 cash for the said hay baler 1 month or 6 weeks from this date, the period of time not to be more than 6 weeks in any event. This letter to be regarded as an agreement between yourself and me for this hay baler, and I hereby testify that I have taken possession of the said baler and that the amount of $50 will be paid by me to you in the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks, and the said payment will be payment in full for this baler. And that's from Emma Miller. And she also has some other correspondence here. Received from A.J. Payu the sum of $55 for 2 cows, 1 big hog, and 9 small ones.
So you mean Arvo had cattle as well, like a farm?
He had, yeah, he did have a few things just on the go. He would try them. At one point, he was renting the horses back from people. And you talk about horse traders trading horses. Well, they actually had a horse exchange in Thunder Bay on the Shunya side of town. And he exchanged his horses, I guess, at times. I just had, yeah, that's just from the McCurdy's, just an invoice. And you were talking about different things.
Costs of things. Oh, right.
Invoices going to out to the bush camps. Well, this one has
Nick Sallow.
Yeah, Nick Sallow, who had a grocery store. He was part of the co-op as well.
Okay.
I don't know how they worked that but initially his building was the co-op until they built that one right where the children's
So that building is pretty old too.
It is.
Pretty
I think it
old.
was late 20s or early 30s. So.
And that's, Kirsten, that's the Gazette office. That building there is the one we're talking about, would have been the co-op.
And then this Nick Sallow's store was, it said, by the Taylor House?
Yes,
I
down
believe
here,
that's
right.
that way. Yep. And you got something like here, half a gallon of molasses, and then 10 pounds of eating potato or apples, rolled oat snuff, of course, your flour, your sugar, you needed canned milk, and
So would this kind of be stuff going to a camp?
that particular one would have been going to a
Right.
camp there. Obviously, the camp cook was going to make up some type of dessert because everybody liked their sweets. And you were talking about fish to the Dampier brothers, about them selling it. Well, Nick has 5 herring here that he was selling. Where they came from, I don't know.
30 cents.
30 cents. He also had some medicinal things like Hoffman drops. I don't know if you've heard that. Well, they use them for Hoffman drops. We suppress a cough because it was a narcotic. Really, back then there wasn't the regulation that they have now. So he had that. And Mrs. Miller also purchased a horse from Arvo, and on the sales thing it says purchased 1 horse, black horse, with white hooves, goes by the name of Bob. And then she was also looking for oats for these horses, and somebody decided that they would take all the oats that Arvo had in his barn. This person had written a message, but they were already promised to Mrs. Miller. So Mrs. Miller went to this person and took them back. She wasn't going to just sit around and wait for them. She She was promised them, so she was getting them. It's kind of interesting, that part.
So McCurdy and McCurdy and Sallow were quite active in sales of
Yes.
all kinds of things that people needed, from the business in the bush camp to the tourists that were coming here. Yeah, McCurdy's were lots of tourists as well, so
Yes.
they were big suppliers in those days, I think.
And it was William McCurdy and then Jack McCurdy.
Right.
And then there was a second son?
I don't know.
Yeah,
One's
I'm-
still alive in the States anyway.
Oh, really?
Oh, I hear from him once in a while.
Okay. Arvo always was after the Minister of Lands and Forests for more cutting rates, and also getting the contracts, because he wasn't, or Arvo wasn't awarded a lot of contracts, but he got together with a fellow contractor, and the two of them asked the minister for more of the Crown land properties to cut down, and it took a while, but they did get some. I probably didn't bring that piece with me. It is quite a long letter at any rate, but the Arvo was trying to sell Nipigon and the area, and he told the minister that the two of them, this partner of his and Arvo, were had hired 600 people a year, keep them in employment. They had ideas of utilizing the wood for other things other than just pulpwood or lumber. He wanted to make pine tar. He wanted to make spools. He wanted to make spindles. He had inquired about a product called Excelsior, and the Excelsior was the wood wool packing that they could use for.
That's right.
Probably a lot of them would have been used for glass bottles, whiskey,
Right.
and he was trying to get that off the ground, but there were a few people ahead of him on that particular one, but the ideas that he had for utilizing the stumps of the trees was quite interesting.
Right, no waste.
No waste. He was trying to do that, but then in the late 30s, he was getting a fair number of contracts, and he was shipping the wood by barge over to the States. Now, if you got a contract for the wood, you had to deliver it, put it on the landing, pay the government taxes and other fees, and when it got to its destination, you had to unload it and pay something at that end. They had fees at that end, so no money was given to the contractor until it was at the other end. And Arvo sent over a few barges of the wood, and he didn't get paid for it at all, and it was $60,000 at that time. So he ended up going into debt, and he didn't want to lose his land, because land was important. And Oiva at that time was going to grade 13 in Thunder Bay. He had to quit school 2 months before he was finished, and he and Oni had to work in the bush or wherever they possibly could. And Arvo basically collapsed. His wife had died in 1944, and he was already in debt before she died, and he just didn't feel like doing anything. He became very sedentary, and he was quite heavy at the end. He was also a little bit rough around the edges, and to the point where there was a story that I was told when I owned the pharmacy by one of the old fellows. Arvo was in the International Hotel having his beers with a bunch of fellows, and this young fellow came up to him with a big knife, and he was going to stab Arvo. And Arvo said, "Go ahead and stab me." He says, "I forgot what I had for breakfast anyways." He was pretty quite a character, apparently. But he died in 1949, and the boys were still in debt. They were getting some gravel contracts or from the mill, but the big thing was they had a tractor that they had to fix almost every night up in the shop, or else the truck, that they had a 3-ton truck. They used to hand bomb gravel with shovels to bring to the mill for the most part, and then they also used the tractor to unload the ships that came into the mill's dock, and they had coal.
Right.
So I was doing that in the evenings after they had been a day in the bush, and then they would come and fix whatever a machine that needed fixing, and there was lots of parts that were coming down on the train.
Oh, okay.
They would just ship them down by the train, but
so they were sort of mechanics by need.
oh yes, yeah. Oni was the mechanic, and Oiva learned it very quickly because he was quite smart at it.
Now, where did they live in those days?
They lived in the old farmhouse in Red Rock.
In Red Rock, okay.
Yeah, and that land was cleared by this fellow, Uno Berg, and he cleared it all, like cut the wood for pulp, and then burnt all the roots, and then made it into a farmland. And
manual labor, eh?
Manual labor, a lot of it for sure. And in fact, he hurt himself and he ended up in the hospital. And there's a bill for Arvo, or the boys, to pay to the hospital for his injury while he was working on their property. Although I think there was still workers' compensation had started up back then somewhat, but I have to look at the dates again because there were so many dates. But so Arvo, or Oiva, was up collecting the pulpwood up behind the Red Rock property, and he put his bulldozer shovel into the ground and realized that he had an alluvial deposit from a glacier. And that's how they started into the gravel business over there, just by chance. Otherwise, they'd still be pulp workers. And after they realized there was going to be a lot of demand for the gravel, they bought a used crusher, and they set that up. They had to go down to the States for that. And what's happened there? I lost my train of thought.
So the crusher is on the back of the property? It was up on...
Yeah, actually the crusher ended up being behind the Petro-Canada here, because Arvo had the property back there, and that was the type of material. Well, they needed both materials.
Okay.
The shale would pack hard like a road, whereas the gravel and sand that was there, it was great for making concrete.
Right.
And before that, there would be a barge that would come into Nipigon Bay with gravel that they took from the bed of the lake. And in one winter, they got caught in a storm, and the barge sunk and it was just by the Nipigon Straits, and it was so deep and that they couldn't get it up. The Dampier brothers went out there to take a look, and there was no way. 5 people perished on that as well. But,
so the Paiute gravel pit is still an identity in this town anyway.
Yes.
Even though it's not as operated as much as it.
No, it hasn't.
But I've seen the cement people up there before.
Yeah, they have that going, and then there's the odd request for certain things, and from people that Christopher knows, he's the one that's operating that right now, but it's not much of an operation, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah. But,
so from logging to gravel to carpentry work, so many things.
There was, and like I say, he was a man doing many things at one time. He also inquired about flour. I guess it must have been he wanted to get that flour for the co-op.
Right.
So he got a letter back from Robin Hood Flour. He purchased some flour, I think, from Ogilvy.
Okay.
I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
He ended up not paying them, so it seemed to me that a lot of the contractors would push their payments right to the edge, and some of them were properties, and in fact one correspondence or not correspondence, a thing from the courts was that Oiva was going to lose a piece of property because it was 3 years behind in payment. So the day before, they would go down there and they would pay the fine and the penalty and get their property back.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That was how they kind of kept the money flowing somewhat.
Right.
But it wasn't an easy task by any means. But
so when did you say Arvo died?
1949.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course Everett has a ton of pictures of the both funerals with the people in the pictures. There are some names that are on there, and Everett sold me a number of reprints.
Right.
Yeah. But what else do we have here?
So now the 2 sons went different ways, or they both stay here?
Oni and Oiva?
Yeah.
Oni became a hermit and lived in that little house on the Red Rock Road in behind the new house, which was built in it was finished in 1958, the year Susan was born. And yeah, he was going to go back to or go to Finland, and he got to New York to take the boat out, and the boat sunk. So he didn't go, obviously.
Oh my.
And after that, he just became a hermit. He kept in contact with all his Nipigon friends by phone all the time. He knew what was going on, and he was quite a mechanic. I would go up there with one of my old cars, and he would say, "You have to do this and this and this," and he says, "I'll hold the wrench, you do this." And he used to call me Bub because he was very hard of hearing, and he didn't want to wear hearing aids.
Okay.
But he actually was a master carpenter as well, and he basically built the Paiute camp in the back shop in the wintertime. We had all the materials there, and it was brought up to Port Arthur lumber, and there's three sides square, and then the outside had that curve to look like it was a log cabin. And so you had log pieces, and he numbered them all, and we were all part of that building. But he was the mastermind behind that.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Talented people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they were talented people.
Yeah.
Some tragedy, but overall, I think they did okay.
So what was Oivo's main work?
It was bringing gravel to
all the gravel, really,
to the mill, and then the townships.
Okay.
Red Rock Township. They redid all the sewer, I believe, and water.
Okay.
And they went from street to street. I remember them digging like 4 feet down, and then that had to be filled up after they put the water,
okay,
and the new sewer lines in.
Okay.
They seemed to have a fair bit of money to do that at that time, but they did just about all the streets.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And then he had private contracts with people, but that was really just fill-in. In the wintertime, he didn't have really anything going on unless they really needed it badly. Then he would use dynamite. Yeah, and dynamite should have been put away in certain spots, but they weren't at times.
Right.
So
okay, just tell us now. Oivo's family was
Velta, his wife, son John, daughter Susan, daughter Jennifer, and son Christopher.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Susan is the only one who lives around here, but Christopher lives in Thunder Bay?
Christopher lives in Thunder Bay, and he's happy to be in Thunder Bay, I guess. He has friends up there from high school days. A lot of them have moved up there. So, and then Jennifer's out in Alberta, in Calgary.
Okay.
And she's on her own. She's divorced, and she has 2 boys. That aren't boys. They're in their 30s now.
I'll say young men now.
Young men, yes.
Yeah, just like yours are. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Susan's got a huge history. So, I mean, when you're doing all that searching, mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling.
To think, though, that he still had all of that material.
Yes.
You know, like some people look at it and then it gets thrown away, but you're saying he was the hoarder. So
yeah, Oiva was, and he kept those boxes in the upstairs of the barn. To see that barn is just phenomenal, because I think that's a big building, the workshop as it is, and some of the wood that he has in there, the logs that go across to hold up the 2nd and 3rd stories, are just humongous. And then they took down that 3rd story. He and Oni, and then made just a peak roof out of it, and didn't really use the upstairs at all for things other than the odd door that he wanted to keep because it was, oak doors or whatever.
Right.
But
right.
They had the old buildings with the galvanized steel on it where they stored bales of hay.
Right.
Susan said as a little girl they would be playing in there all the time and jumping down onto the hay. So
where that house was on the road, how far it went? Right, his property went back up the mountain.
Right up the mountain.
Right up the mountain.
Over to the other side, almost to the end of where Mata's road ends.
Oh my!
Over that side, yeah.
What a piece of property!
That was a big
to
chunk.
have negotiated to purchase even.
Yes.
In those days.
And then he had property on Black Bay Peninsula. They called it Ancliffe. In fact, on certain maps you will see Ancliffe on there.
Okay.
And the kids, 3 kids decided to give it or sell it to the Royal Conservancy.
Oh. Okay.
Whether it was Canada or I don't think it was the local one, but it was in addition to what had been sold to this Royal Conservancy before. That area, people will say, yeah, that was just a bunch of swamp. It's marshland,
right?
And it's very valuable for the birds, the wildlife,
right.
And we were happy that that's what they decided, or I was really happy that they decided to give it or sell it to them.
Right. So now, when the property on Red Rock Road was sold, all of it?
One big chunk.
One big chunk.
Yes.
Wow.
Unfortunately, but that's the way it would had to go amongst the children.
Right. So let's hope it still gets called Paiute Mountain.
Yes. Or somebody decides to buy it from the present owners, and they apparently had done surveys on it, and there are big chunks that are for sale that are 1 mile long, but I'm not sure what the width is, and it's owned by, I understand, BMI.
Oh.
Yes, but they didn't buy it initially. They bought it off of somebody else who had initially bought it and thought they were going to make this playground back there, but they were a couple in their early 40s with a young child, and I think they got caught with the interest rates at that time. The second year starting to go up. So
okay. So also we could include the fact that Paiute Mountain was the place where everybody went sliding. It was well known for that, and him always giving permission. I'm thinking the liability today.
Yes.
But it was, right? It was the place for everybody to go for sliding.
And then in the 1950s, the first tower went up for the television.
Okay.
Yeah, and then when they started getting cable and that, of course, they were the first ones on the line to get the television from Duluth or Quebec.
And
Marquette, I should say.
And I'm thinking now too, the run in Red Rock, does it still go up the mountain?
Paiute Mountain Run. I don't know if they've had it the last couple of years.
I don't know either. I'm thinking about it. So Paiute name is still certainly around when it comes to that mountain.
But the road itself going up there is not in the best of shape. It hasn't been maintained,
right?
Obviously, because there's.
And maybe that's why they don't use it, because I think I remember last time that I remember people were commenting. Coming down was pretty tricky.
Yeah, there's a couple of the diehards that use it. I think Rocky Mercier, he still goes up there, and the Allairs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Trish and
right.
Alice. Yes.
Okay. Interesting, and a lot of detail, and
but as you say, there's so much information here. Susan has said it deserves a book, but I says, well, I'm not writing it. You're writing it.
Yes, right. And just even preserving some of this stuff.
Some of the information.
So maybe one of your kids or something might be interested someday.
Well,
you never know.
Yes. Well, Robbie is the collector.
Oh.
He has the one of the hay balers on his property. Before they got it sold, he got Jimmy Dampier to pick up the hay balers, the cultivators, any piece of the farm machinery, and so he's got it on that property up at the end of Hogan Road. Not that he, I shouldn't be saying that.
Good for him, but anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Thank you very much for coming, Paul. Thanks for doing all that work. Thanks, Susan.
Yeah. I could have been
for spurring you on to do all that work.
Yeah, she certainly did. I mean, this was her typing initially from one of the original interviews from her dad.
Okay.
And she had her old basic typewriter, and she typed that up, and then I have more where she's printed it all out, and I just had to be going back and forth because there would be tidbits in one and not in the other. So
anyway, thank you very much.
You're welcome.